Skyrim's enchantment system is one of the deepest rabbit holes in gaming, and most players have barely scratched the surface. So today I'm breaking down the most powerful enchantments in Skyrim and explaining exactly why they work. Starting with one everybody's used but almost nobody has optimized correctly. Absorb. Health. Absorb. Health is the enchantment that rewards you for being aggressive. Every hit steals a fixed amount of health and adds it directly to your own. You're dealing damage and healing yourself simultaneously. The vampire fantasy in enchantment form, but here's the thing, most players miss. The health you steal triggers per hit, not per damage. That means a dagger proccing. Absorb health 5 times in the span a great sword swings once is stealing 5 times the health. Daggers. The tiny little toothpicks nobody respects are the optimal delivery system, and unlike Absorb Magicka and Absorb Stamina, which each have 2 stackable versions, Absorb Health only has 1 in the game's files. Your extra effect perk slot is wide open. Slap on Paralyze, Chaos Damage, whatever you want. You're not just a blender that heals itself, you're a blender with a second trick. Every swing is a healing potion. Every fight is a feedback loop where attacking harder makes you harder to kill. You can clear entire dungeons without touching your inventory once, which is, not ideal for the potion economy, but fantastic for you. But if Absorb Health keeps you alive through brute force, the next enchantment keeps you alive by making sure your enemies can't move at all. Paralyze. Here's the thing about Paralyze. It does 0 extra damage, not a single point, and it's still one of the most feared enchantments in the entire game, because Paralyze doesn't care about your health bar. It cares about removing you from the fight entirely. The weapon enchantment version has a 26% chance to trigger paralysis on each hit. That sounds low on paper, but think about how many times you swing a sword in an average fight. You're connecting 4, 5, 6 times before a bandit even finishes their power attack animation. Statistically, that bandit is hitting the floor, and once they're down, they have to go through the entire standing back up animation before they can do anything. That recovery window is basically a free invitation to turn them into a piñata. The spell version lasts a full 10 seconds, bumped to 15 with the stability perk, 15 seconds of an enemy lying face down while you do whatever you want. Pure damage is great, but control enables tactics that damage simply cannot. Paralyze does have blind spots though. Dragons are completely immune. Dwarven automatons shrug it off too. So your crowd control king has exactly 0 authority over the 2 enemy types most likely to ruin your afternoon, which is, not ideal. Still, watching a Draugr Deathlord ragdoll mid-shout never gets old. But if you think disabling enemies is powerful, wait until you see what happens when your weapon is specifically designed to kill things that never asked to be in a fight on Huntsman's Prowess. The Poacher's Axe does 3 extra points of damage to animals. 3. You could sneeze on a wolf and do more damage than that. But here's the thing, this enchantment is way more interesting than it has any right to be. The Bow of the Hunt carries the exact same effect at 20 points of damage. That's almost 7 times stronger on a completely different weapon. The gap between those 2 numbers is genuinely baffling, like Bethesda rolled a dice for the axe and just went with it, but the real value is that you can disenchant the Poacher's Axe despite it being unique. Learn the enchantment, slap it on a custom weapon, and scale it with your enchanting skill. Suddenly that pathetic 3 damage becomes something actually meaningful, and the creature listed effects is surprisingly long. Bears, wolves, sabercats, mammoths, mudcrabs, spiders, foxes, deer, elk, basically anything that doesn't have a conversation tree. If you've ever committed to a wilderness hunter build, this enchantment is your entire personality. The problem is obvious though. Most things trying to kill you in Skyrim are bandits, Draugr, vampires, or dragons. None of those count as animals, so you're carrying a hyper-specialized tool in a game that mostly throws humanoid problems at you, which is, not ideal, but if limited utility sounds bad, wait until you hear about an enchantment that does literally one thing and somehow still earns a spot on this list. Water breathing. Water breathing is the enchantment nobody thinks they need until they're drowning in a flooded Nordic ruin at 2 a.m. with no potions left. Here's the thing, without this enchantment, you get roughly 15 seconds of underwater breath before the game starts killing you. That's barely enough time to find a chest, let alone loot it. What makes water breathing genuinely unique is that it has 0 scaling, none. A petty soul gem provides the exact same unlimited underwater breathing as a grand soul gem. That makes it the cheapest enchantment in the entire game to apply, which is, not ideal for Bethesda's carefully balanced economy, but fantastic for you. Getting your hands on it is straightforward too. There's a permanent circlet of water breathing sitting in the inner sanctum during the Touching the Sky quest, just waiting to be picked up by anyone willing to trudge through the Forgotten Vale. Now, if you're playing an Argonian, you can skip this entire section. Their racial ability grants permanent water breathing from the start. Must be nice being a lizard. Look, water breathing isn't flashy. It won't win you any fights, fights, but during those specific quests where the game decides you need to navigate an underwater labyrinth, it transforms from boring utility to the only reason you're still alive. But if a little water seems manageable, wait until you hear about the enchantment that lets you shrug off dragon fire, lightning bolts, and everything in between. Resist magic. This is the enchantment that turns dragon breath into a mild inconvenience. Resist magic provides a percentage-based reduction to all incoming magical damage, and it hard caps at 85%. Anything you stack beyond that does absolutely nothing. Zero additional benefit, which means the entire game becomes about hitting that number as efficiently as possible. Here's the thing, you can get absurdly close to that cap without enchanting a single piece of gear. A Breton character starts with 25% magic resistance baked into their DNA, slap on the Lord Stone for another 25%. Complete the quest for Agent of Mara, that's 15% more. You're sitting at 65% passive magic resistance, and you haven't even looked at an arcane enchanter yet. Throw in the alteration magic resistance perks, which scale up to 30% across 3 ranks, and you've blown past the cap with room to spare. But here's where it gets really interesting. Elemental resistances like fire, frost, and shock operate on a completely separate 85% cap. That means you can have 85% magic resistance and 85% fire resistance at the same time. The math on that works out to a cumulative 97.75% damage reduction against fire spells. An ancient dragon's fire breath, the thing that's supposed to be one of the most devastating attacks in the game, hits you for roughly the same damage as a stiff breeze, which is, not ideal for the dragon, but if you think being functionally immune to magic is impressive, wait until you hear about the enchantment that makes you completely invisible to every enemy in the game. Muffle. Every enchantment in Skyrim has a guaranteed location. You can look it up, walk there, pick it up, and slap it on your gear. Every single one. Except Muffle. Muffle is the only enchantment in the base game that has 0 fixed spawn points anywhere on the map. You can't walk to it, you can't quest for it, you have to get lucky. It shows up randomly in merchant inventories or drops from leveled loot tables, and that's it. Pray to the RNG gods or go home empty-handed, and it's not even a complicated effect. You put it on boots, your footsteps become completely silent, no casting cost, no duration timer, just permanently on. Which sounds simple until you realize what it actually enables. Heavy armor in Skyrim comes with a massive noise detection penalty. You're basically a walking dinner bell. Every guard, every draugr in a 50-foot radius knows you're coming. Muffle bypasses that entirely. Slap it on Daedric boots and suddenly you're sneaking just as effectively as someone in full leather. It breaks a fundamental rule the game was designed around, and it does it passively. The community stories about hunting for this thing are genuinely painful. Players have reported spending dozens of hours checking every merchant and every hold, fast traveling between shops, saving before entering, reloading if the inventory doesn't have muffled boots, and repeating the whole cycle. Save scumming merchant inventories for one enchantment. That's the level of desperation we're talking about. But if you think finding Muffle is frustrating, wait until you see what Banish does to the game's economy. Banish. Banish sounds like it should be terrifying. An enchantment that forces Daedra back to oblivion, ripping summon flame Atronachs and storm Atronachs straight out of reality and sending them home. On paper, that's incredible. In practice, it's one of the most hilariously useless combat enchantments in the entire game. Here's the thing, Banish only works on conjured creatures. That's it. Every bandit, every draugr, every dragon, every wolf, every single humanoid enemy you'll ever fight in Skyrim, completely immune. The enchantment does literally nothing to them. You're swinging a weapon that says begone, foul Daedra, at a guy in fur armor who doesn't even know what a Daedra is, which is, not ideal, but here's where it gets weird. Despite being basically worthless in combat, Banish is the single most valuable enchantment in the game for an entirely different reason. Weapons enchanted with Banish receive the highest monetary value increase of any enchantment, period. Slap Banish on an iron dagger with a petty soul gem, and suddenly you're holding an item worth more than some houses. The community figured this out years ago and collectively decided that Banish isn't a combat enchantment. It's an economics enchantment. Players mass-produce Banish daggers specifically to sell them to merchants at absurdly inflated prices. The enchantment designed to protect you from the forces of oblivion is now basically a small business. Hi, I'd like to sell you 47 daggers that do nothing useful. That'll be all of your gold, please. But if Banish found its true calling in capitalism, the next enchantment found its calling by being 2 enchantments pretending to be one. Fiery Soul Trap. Every other enchantment in Skyrim plays by the rules. 1 slot, 1 effect. Fiery Soul Trap looked at that system and said no thanks. This is the only enchantment in the base game that gives you 2 effects for the price of 1, combining Soul Trap and fire damage into a single enchantment slot, which is, basically cheating. Here's the thing, you can find this enchantment in exactly one place. The Steel Battle Axe of Fiery Soul sits inside Ironbind Barrow, south of Dawnstar, and it's a guaranteed spawn. gone. No random loot tables, no praying to the RNG gods, no reloading merchant inventories 40 times. You walk in, you grab it, you disenchant it. Done. That makes it one of the best early game pickups in the entire game, and most players walk right past it. Now, the fire damage component doesn't scale with your enchanting perks, which sounds like a downside until you realize it does benefit from the Augmented Flames perk in the destruction tree. That's a 50% fire damage increase coming from a completely different skill tree. It's a non-obvious cross-skill synergy that rewards players who actually understand how the systems interact, but the real magic happens when you grab the extra effect perk. Suddenly you're slapping Fiery Soul Trap plus one additional enchantment of your choice onto a single weapon. That's effectively 3 enchantment effects on one blade. And because the Soul Trap component fills soul gems with every kill, the weapon literally pays for its own recharging. You never run out of gems. It's a completely self-sustaining enchantment economy, but if you think a 2-for-1 enchantment is creative, wait until you see the enchantment that turns your bare fists into legitimate weapons. Fortify Unarmed. Every single unarmed build in Skyrim begins with a pilgrimage, not to some ancient temple or legendary forge, to a sewer. Specifically, the Ratway beneath Riften, where a guy named John the Fist is sitting around wearing the only pair of gloves of the pugilist in the entire base game. One guy, one sewer, one pair of gloves. That's it. That's the entire foundation of fist fighting in Skyrim. Here's the thing. Without this enchantment, unarmed combat doesn't just fall off at higher levels. It becomes genuinely impossible. Your fists stop scaling while everything else in the game keeps getting stronger, which means by level 30, you're essentially slapping a dragon with a pool noodle. Fortify Unarmed is the only thing standing between punching builds and complete irrelevance. But the real move isn't wearing Gion's gloves. It's destroying them. Disenchanting the gloves of the pugilist permanently deletes them from your inventory, but it unlocks the ability to apply Fortify Unarmed to gauntlets and jewelry. That means you can stack the enchantment across multiple equipment slots, turning your bare hands into something that actually hurts. It also counts as a skill enchantment for the Insightful Enchanter perk, which lets you squeeze even more damage out of each piece. And then there's the Restoration Loop. Combine Fortify Unarmed with that particular exploit, which we'll get to later, and you can create gauntlets with damage values so absurd that a single punch kills literally anything in the game. You went from "please stop hitting me, I'm trying to punch you" to deleting endgame bosses with your bare fists, all because of one guy in a sewer. But if Fortify Unarmed bends the rules for one playstyle, Chaos Damage throws the entire rulebook into a blender. Chaos Damage. Every other enchantment in this game gives you a number. You hit something, that number comes off their health bar. Chaos Damage looks at that entire concept and says, how about we gamble instead? Here's how it works. When you swing a Chaos Damage weapon, 3 separate coin flips happen simultaneously. Fire, Frost, and Shock. Each independently roll a 50% chance to trigger. That means every single swing produces one of 8 possible damage combinations. You might get all 3 elements slamming into your target at once. You might get 2, you might get 1, or you might get absolutely nothing, which is, not ideal. But here's where it gets genuinely ridiculous. Dual wield 2 chaos damage weapons, and each one rolls independently. That's 64 possible damage combinations per attack sequence. You're essentially playing slots every time you press the attack button. The ceiling damage is obscene. Chaos damage benefits from Augmented Flames, Augmented Frost, and Augmented Shock simultaneously, each perk adding 50% to its respective element. No other enchantment in the game can triple dip on elemental perks like that. And because it hits all 3 damage types, you're attacking every resource pool at once. Fire eats health, Frost drains stamina, Shock burns magicka. Your enemy is getting hit on every front simultaneously, and they literally cannot defend against all of it. The community calls it the best weapon enchantment in Skyrim, and mathematically, they're right. When it fires on all cylinders, nothing else comes close. But that when is doing a lot of heavy lifting. Some swings you're a god, other swings you're holding a very expensive stick. But if you think a broken enchantment that sometimes works is frustrating, wait until you hear about one that never worked at all. Silent, Moon's enchantment. This enchantment is supposed to burn enemies alive under moonlight. That's what the game tells you. Weapons from Silent Moon's camp supposedly deal fire damage between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. tied to the lunar cycle. Sounds cool. Atmospheric, mysterious even. Turns out, no, it doesn't work at all. The Silent Moon's enchantment is completely broken in vanilla Skyrim. The fire damage simply does not function as intended. But here's where it gets genuinely fascinating, because what it actually does is way weirder than what it's supposed to do. If you disenchant a lunar weapon and apply the Silent Moon's effect to your own gear, the time restriction vanishes entirely. Your custom version works at any hour. Great. Except the fire damage still doesn't damage enemy health. The enchantment targets the wrong thing completely. Instead of health, it modifies the enemy's weapon speed mult actor value, reducing their attack speed by a multiplier of 1.13. Affected enemies swing at only 7 to 22 92% of their normal speed. So Bethesda accidentally created a slow effect disguised as a fire enchantment, which is, not ideal, but here's the kicker. This broken mechanic is actually devastating against specific enemies. The Ebony Warrior, one of the toughest fights in the entire game, relies heavily on quick shot for his archery. Hit him with a Silent Moon's weapon and his bow attacks become comically slow. An enchantment that does literally nothing it claims to do suddenly becomes an endgame secret weapon. Mods exist to fix it, restoring the intended fire damage and lunar cycle mechanics, but honestly, the accident might be more interesting than the original design ever was. But if you think a broken enchantment is wild, wait until you see what happens when Fortify Alchemy and Fortify Smithing start feeding into each other. Fortify Alchemy and Smithing. Every enchantment we've talked about so far plays by the rules. This one doesn't. Fortify Alchemy and Fortify Smithing are, on their own, perfectly normal crafting enchantments. Slap Fortify Alchemy on a helmet, make slightly better potions. Put Fortify Smithing on some gauntlets, improve your weapons a bit more. Totally fine. Totally balanced, but someone figured out what happens when you combine them with Fortify Restoration, and the entire game collapsed. Here's how it works. You enchant a helmet, gauntlets, ring, and necklace with Fortify Alchemy. Put all of that on. Brew a Fortify Restoration potion, drink it, unequip your Fortify Alchemy gear, and re-equip it. Because the game considers your enchantments active when you re-equip them, your Fortify Alchemy values are now higher than before. So you brew another Fortify Restoration potion, which is now stronger. Drink it, unequip, re-equip, brew again. Each cycle makes the next potion exponentially more powerful. After enough cycles, you craft a Fortify Enchanting potion with a value so high the number stops meaning anything. You use that potion to enchant gear with Fortify Smithing, use that gear to improve a weapon at a grindstone, and now you're holding an iron dagger that does 4 million damage. That's not an exaggeration. The restoration loop turns Skyrim's crafting system into a mathematical infinity engine. Every difficulty setting becomes meaningless. Alduin, the World Eater, the literal end of all things, goes down like a wet paper bag, and it all starts with two completely innocent enchantments that just wanted to help you make better swords and potions, which is, not ideal for game balance. But it is the single most famous exploit in Skyrim's history, and the perfect way to end this list. Because Fortify Alchemy and Fortify Smithing don't just represent the ceiling of what enchantments can do, they represent the ceiling of what's possible in Elder Scrolls V, period. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.